all of a sudden you start paying a 20% tax to take the money out of Brazil. More and more what we're seeing is that the regulation is going very much against the best interest of the user. It's making properly licensed operators and properly licensed jurisdictions very uncompetitive. That means that the unlicensed operators can very often offer better products, better user experience, better customer journeys. Female demographic is much bigger than in other geos. There you have a lot of VIPs and they have a gambling culture. So you're either white hat at the top of the market, or I would say with the cost of licensing and everything, it's very difficult for you to make it work as a lower relevancy white hat brand, and there is less compliance in Latin America. And this means that you can test more things, you can do more things if you can get into the culture in Latin America, even with a smaller budget. It's much easier for you to win. Latin America is a very volatile region.
Breaking news.
Odys is selling 86% of their inventory to over 40,000 verified buyers, and most of it are instant sales. Are you sitting on a premium age domain? Sign up for Odys Marketplace right now and wait for your check. Hello, welcome back to Odys Podcast. My name is Aneta Samkov and we're recording today at SBC in Lisbon. And my guest is Martim from Plat Media, who are affiliates for Latin America and South of Europe. And our topic today is affiliation in Latin America. Thank you so much, Martim, for coming.
Thank you, Aneta. And I was very surprised with the invitation because most of the times I have nothing valuable to add. But the people that invited me do think that I may say some things that are interesting. So I'm, happy with the invite.
True, because you're just waiting for your retirement.
That's the goal. I'm planning on retiring tomorrow when we leave SBC. I don't know if it will be possible or not, but that's, what I'm waiting for.
So before you go on your retirement, can you share a little bit about your journey in iGaming and particularly how you transitioned to focus on affiliate marketing?
Yes. So maybe you'll see during the podcast, and Aneta, we spoke a bit, so you can definitely confirm to the cameras that I'm not a very smart person. And because of that, I was studying, and when I wanted to continue my studies, I could choose to do so in a lot of, let's say, even in iGaming terms, tier 1 countries. But I decided that I wanted to continue my studies in Russia. And when I was in Russia, I was looking for a job. And of course, the legal way to do it, it was impossible because they would have to sponsor some kind of visa. And so I started working as an affiliate manager for an operator. My salary in the beginning was $200 a month. And then from then, I started seeing what the people that I was bringing on board, which was the affiliates, what they were doing, the numbers they were doing, what I thought was very well executed, where I thought there was some room for improvement. And that's basically how everything unfolded after I started working in the industry.
Mm-hmm. So looking at iGaming industry nowadays, like how would you describe its overall state and health and maturity compared to a couple years ago?
I think more and more what we're seeing is that the regulation is going very much against the best interest of the user in terms of user experience. Maybe for the rest, there's some alignment there. Mm-hmm. And what I'm thinking is that it's making properly licensed operators and properly licensed jurisdictions very uncompetitive, because there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of taxes, there's a lot of obstacles, there's a lot of things that they have to go through, a lot of compliance that the unlicensed operators do not have to go through. And that means that the unlicensed operators can very often offer better products, better user experience, better customer journeys to the user. And at the end of the day, the user, he may have some uh, reservations against using an unlicensed operator in the beginning, but then the pros of doing so for their criteria outweigh the cons, and they end up opting for unlicensed operators. So I'd say more and more we're seeing a shift to more countries regulating it, but in doing so, not doing a very good job for the end user. And because of that, a very big shift to unlicensed operators.
And how about the technological shift impacting the affiliate strategies?
There is a lot of technicality, there's a lot of implementations, and Odys works with one of the parts that definitely has a lot of technology and explores a lot of the flaws of technology, of course, in their profit. So there's definitely a lot of technology. There's a lot of things that don't work out so well because there's constant change and there's constant search for how can I use this efficiency or lack of efficiency to my favor. And now, especially with all the AI, the algorithms, and all the attempts of people to like do something else, the big software technological companies, of course, because of their size, they're a bit slower. And because they are slower, that means that the people that don't have that burden, that compliance, they can act much quicker, and they can put the technological flaws and the timing flaws and the headcount flaws of the big technological companies to their use. So it's a very technological, it's a very technical industry. And I also think that between that and the lack of speed of some bodies or some technological companies to react, that means that the technology can bring results much, much faster. So,
And all that you said, does that also apply to affiliates in LatAm?
yes, for sure. I think affiliates, you have, at the end of the day, all we are doing, it's a bit reducing, actually, to be honest, for our mental capacity, because all we're doing is arbitrage. So we are trying to get 10 euros for something that we are paying 1, 2, 8, 9 euros, whatever it is. That's the whole business of affiliation, to keep your cost base lower than the eventual return that you may get. So of course you'll try to use as much technology and as much improvements in these margins to keep your business alive. The LatAm side of things, Latin America is a very volatile region, because you had basically a gold mine that was Brazil. A few years ago, Brazil regulated in a way where the user is not better off, for the most part, being with a regulated partner versus an unregulated one, except for the theoretical guarantee of the withdrawals, which is, of course, a very big one. Then that gold mine ended, some new geos came up. Those new geos that started appearing as very interesting, all of a sudden you start here a bit less. And there's another, I would say, country that is being the talk. And a lot of that also comes from regulation that does not go in accordance to the best interests of the player at the end of the day. And because of that, they go somewhere else. And
so the same problem that you mentioned in general with the regulation.
Yes,
right?
and because in Europe we had a shift from analog to computers to phones. In Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, the middle part of it, so the computers, it didn't happen, right? So the technological adoption of these regions, it's much higher. So very often they are ahead in the trends, in the new adoption of like new traffic sources, new funnels, new tools, new concepts. And so I would say, because of the two things, the added volatility because of the regulation and this ease of adoption of like new trends, new everything by the people in Latin America, things change much, much faster than, for example, in Europe, where there's definitely more stability in the markets.
Could you characterize the markets in Latin America very shortly? Because this is a pretty diverse range.
Yes. So the very, very interesting market that we had before was Brazil. With regulation, I would say the legal market of Brazil was killed. It seems as though that now there's some new brands trying to enter the market. We spoke with a few of them here on SBC. I would say a few like unlicensed brands. There's a few bigger affiliates trying to re-enter the market in Latin America. So we will see what's going to happen. It's still one of the biggest markets there in terms of population, only rivaled by Mexico. In Chile, you have a country that, in terms of player value, will oftentimes go closer to the European tier 2, tier 3 player value. So that one makes it very, very interesting. Unlike Brazil, it's much more focused on casino. Female demographic is much bigger than in other geos.
Really?
Yes. So there's definitely a lot of women using the platforms and the products.
Oh,
And especially casino, I'd say it's very strong there. And you have a lot of VIPs, and they have a gambling culture because they've had offline casinos for a very, very long time. You have Argentina now that has coming up as a very, very important market. Because when the affiliates, and we of course contribute to that as well, when we hear that something is good, you test it, you definitely see the numbers, you put so many resources into that, and all the companies do it, that very quickly you exhaust the market. Maybe you exhaust the market in like 12 months, something like that. So then you jump on to the next one. So lately, I think Argentina is winning a bit of relevancy there in the overall sphere. And a lot of the people in Argentina, because of the currency issues that they've kept US dollars and they play in US dollars. So when you convert the other currencies like the Brazilian real, the Chilean peso, which is a bit more stable, the Colombian peso, into dollars, the player value is not so interesting anymore. Once you do with the Argentinian, they already start using US dollars. So that's definitely something that adds in favor of the user. But of course, there's a market right now in every Latin American country, even El Salvador or anything.
Where do you see the greatest opportunities in that market?
I think the definitely obvious choice is currently Argentina. What I definitely see as a very strong, I see two very strong possibilities right now in Latin America. I would say Mexico for the size of the country. Only Brazil rivals that, and Brazil was like a huge one. And in Mexico, you have people consuming all sports. You have in the south of Mexico our European football, so soccer is very popular. You have basketball, you have baseball, you have the American football in the north of the country. So there's basically sports all over. And Mexico is basically dominated by one operator only. And they have 75% market share maybe. So they have released the numbers recently. They have not grown, but the overall market has grown, which means that their market share is shrinking a bit. And there's definitely room for like more operators to try and claim this like 75% market shares, which is what another operator had in Brazil before a few other brands start entering. And I would say the regulators in Colombia, they started charging VAT, I think, for the deposits, which again, if it's not aligned with the best interest of the users at the end of the day, there's the opportunity for new unlicensed market entrants to try and get some market share. And I think the value proposition there is very clear. So I would say Mexico, because there's like an incumbent, and Colombia, because there may be a shift from licensed to unlicensed operators in the near future.
Oh, I see. So on the flip side, what are the risks in Latin American markets?
I think it's very difficult for a brand that is not regional, that is not local, to really understand the local players and to really be a household name with the local players. So, for example, in Brazil, you have or three brands out of the top 10, 15 that are not local brands. And one of them appeared much more recently. So you had two brands out of the top like 15 or 20, just because they had like much more budget to have the resources on the field, to understand the player, to have a local team that can definitely cater to the player and be present where it's important for them. I would say that sometimes if you're doing something with programmatic, maybe you don't have to be really into the culture and be such a household name for the local users. If you want to have a proper brand, you have to do all or almost all of the marketing initiatives, and for that you have to have a bigger understanding of the regional players and how can you be closer to them, which is a very, very big struggle.
Okay. So what else is specific about Latin America compared to other markets?
I would say because they jumped the generation of the laptops, they are much more into trends. They are much more into influencers. They are much more into community. And because of that, it's definitely much different than a few of the other operators and geographies where you have the standard SEO, PPC, programmatic, and you can capture. So here, working with micro influencers, oftentimes you'll have a much higher return on investment, even if it's difficult to deploy significant amounts of budget, than I would say the more standard marketing initiatives. Also, of course, the payment methods, it's something like that. In Brazil, for example, they have a lot of sayings or local things or things that suddenly become part of the culture, as were PG soft games, right, with the Fortune Tiger. And so I would say there's like a lot of factors, but overall, being part of culture and becoming culture is one of the most important ones that I think can definitely make or break a brand.
It's a very competitive market, right?
It's a very competitive market because a lot of the brands entering there do not have the same understanding that the local markets have. They may have a bigger budget, but I would say understanding and localization are more important than the size of budget in those geos.
Oh, interesting. Can you stay white hat in such competitive market?
You can stay white hat. Because with white hat, you also have much more ease in deploying budgets and big budgets. So, for example, if you're sponsoring a football league, only a white hat will be able to do so. For the most part, you have some exceptions, like in Italy, maybe. But yes, if you want to deploy big budgets, you can do the white hat. Of course, you'll have some initiatives, some brand ambassadors that will only work with white hat. That's like the very, very top of the market. So you're either white hat at the top of the market, or I would say with the cost of licensing and everything, it's very difficult for you to make it work as a lower relevancy white hat brand. And maybe the solution is to go as an unlicensed one if you're comfortable with the risks. But that's a personal and company decision for each person.
Very interesting. So with Brazil becoming regulated, a lot of attention went over there. What would you recommend
to new affiliates trying to enter that space and try to avoid doing the same thing as others?
I think the regulation with Brazil, in the beginning, they had some talks with people with from other regulated markets that definitely did a good job in terms of regulation.
Mhm.
But for some reason, that coordination between the government, the best interests of the users, and the operators, it broke down, and then the regulations that came to the public, they were very harming for the industry. So basically, operators, they lost a very, very big percentage of the conversions. They lost a very big chunk of the market, and black hat operators won a lot of the market because they found ways to process the payments and they did not have the KYC or intrusive taxes, and because of that, they could operate. I think a lot of the big affiliates, because they have a preference to working with regulation, they stop or reduced a lot of the interest in the regulated Brazilian market. A lot of the big affiliates that are more comfortable with unregulated started entering the market. And so I would say that at the end of the day, it all comes down to, when a regulator comes, what do we want to achieve? Because if they want to maximize taxation on the numbers that they see today, they will implement an amount of taxes that will reduce the whole pie, because players and brands will have a preference to not going for the license. And because of that, I think that the regulator should look at somehow trying to benefit the user experience if you go with the regulated ones, because then you have tax compliant entities working in the country that employ local people that pay taxes in the country, so they end up helping the country, and the user also has a better experience playing locally versus playing like with unlicensed ones. So I would say at the end of the day, it's how can the regulator make it a positive trade-off for the end user to go with local operators.
I see. And with Brazil's law requiring operators to register all of their affiliates, how does this create both hurdles and advantages for experienced affiliates like yourself?
Yes, I think in terms of compiling everything and having a very streamlined operation and understanding who is promoting a specific brand, I think that made it much easier, because you have a centralized database of who is working, who is approved, what can they do, what are they promoting, is there any conflict of interest for us. The disadvantages, for example, for an affiliate, all of a sudden you start paying a 20% tax to take the money out of Brazil. So if you're working on a very heavy performance based strategy, your margins are compressed, and if on top of that you add a 20% tax to take the money out of the country, if you wish to do so, if you want to keep the money there, keep the team there, and keep the potential profits there, that's one thing. But if not, all of a sudden it becomes very difficult for an affiliate to be like, I'm comfortable with this and I still have the margin to work here, and I'm happy to keep the profits in the country, because a lot of the big affiliates, they are owned or they have operations or headquarters somewhere else. And so streamlining, having like transparency, that's definitely a plus. The minus is, as I said previously, that there's set of regulations that do not help at the end of the day the user or the affiliate or the overall market, and then they would rather go for an unlicensed one, for example, if all the compliance is the same, because they'll make 20% more money if you don't count this tax, for example.
See, and Latin America is such a diverse continent. Do you think it's actually better to focus on like a very specific country rather than create content that resonates in audiences in different countries? But if so, then how do you do that?
I definitely think that it's important to understand that Latin America, it's a very diverse country, but the population is actually considerable because both Peru and Colombia, they have like 30 million people each. Chile maybe has 20, Argentina 50, Mexico almost 200, Brazil 250. So they're like huge markets. So I don't think at all we should look at it as like a region. We should look at it as countries. And you can see, for example, Mexico until a few years ago, until the country started not Mexico, Peru until a few years ago was basically owned by a whole brand. What we have in Mexico today with like 75% market share, in Peru there was one brand that had much more market share. Why? They maybe saw the opportunity, or maybe they saw some interesting traffic there. They focused there, and for a very long period of time, they basically owned the whole country in terms of like users. And it's still 30 million people that maybe they have less purchasing power than Europe, but in Europe you have countries that like 8 million people, right?
Yes.
So if you compare 30 million and you own the whole country, I think it's a very, very wise decision because you also have less eyeballs, unless all of a sudden it becomes the El Dorado as it did with Brazil. But until then, there was a lot of years with a lot of mobile adoption where a lot of countries in Latin America had very interesting numbers for a lot of the operators there.
Oh, very interesting. Can you speak a little bit about the tools? Like, are there any tools that you find particularly useful, especially for Latin American market?
I think one of the things that make it more competitive, but also more interesting to operate in Latin America is there is less compliance in Latin America. And this means that you can test more things, you can do more things than in Europe, where for whatever it is, more compliance, more European Union regulation, more GDPR concerns, whatever it is, things that you cannot do or test in Europe. So I would say that in terms of technical tools, they exist everywhere, but a lot of the suppliers that you have, a lot of the things where you can deploy something and get some attention, there's definitely less compliance in Latin America, and because of that, you can be bolder. You can test more things, you can fail faster, and then do something faster as well once you learn your lessons. So I would say that, yes, the fact that there's more lenient infrastructure in Latin America definitely makes it a more dynamic market to operate. And that's why also the markets, they become interesting and they die in like 12 to 18 months because everyone has the same allowance, so to say, to try things and less compliance. That's for everyone that's trying to enter the market.
This is also a quite young market, right? As the demographics in Europe don't look as positive as in Latin America. I think there is a lot of opportunities with the Gen Z players over there. Could you speak a little bit about like strategies that work best for targeting that type of players?
Yes. I would say that, for example, if you go to European Tier 1, it's the same SEO PPC, which is basically where you have the biggest player values because it's already aligned with the customer journey and they are already looking for a solution. So whoever shows first and can send the player, he's already thinking about that. So the player value is of course going to be better, to be higher there. There's also the same in Latin America, but in Latin America, there's also the community. There's also the new money for people that never had money. They are like easier to impress. There's also the community side of things. There's also much more events. There's also much more life like on the street and something like that. There's also much more trends. And because of that, as I said previously, if you can get into the culture in Latin America, even with a smaller budget, it's much easier for you to win. It's very difficult to get the culture, but once you do, it's much easier for you to win.
Okay.
And because of that, culture is immediately associated with like younger people, and so you'll be at the end of the day aligned with one thing, but that thing has like multiple components, right? Multiple levers that you're pulling so that you can get the results at the end of the day.
Could you also talk about the regulations? How do you see them develop in the future? Are they going to become stricter with respect to different countries, or where do you see it's heading?
I see, unfortunately, a trend that there's more and more regulation and more, I wouldn't say greed, but the regulators and the governments, they work with very tight budgets. So I think it's a very natural and human thing to look at something and it's like, well, I have, I don't know, 100 units here. Oh, let me increase like 2% more so that I can get like 102 units.
Yeah.
What is difficult to calculate in that moment is if I increase like 2 percentage points here, how many people are going to drop off? And then, of course, my tax base it's going to be smaller. So I'll not be gaining like 102. Maybe I'm going to be getting like 98 or something like that, right? So that's the difference there. And what we're seeing in Brazil is, as I said previously, they had an alignment with like regulators from other countries. All of a sudden, that did not come to fruition, and the government started adding more and more things, more and more taxes, more and more obstacles, and so the tax base is higher. And because of that, the expectation that they had for like an amount of players that are going to be in the regulated market decreased, and because of that, the black market is huge. You had Colombia that, as I said, they added VAT in, I think, like the deposits, right? It's a money deposit. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, not our position to like question that, but at the end of the day, if the user wants to put 100 units of their currency, do they really want to add, I don't know, VAT rate? Let's assume it's like 20%, 20% more that has no use. You're not going to play with that. It's an immediate tax. You want, it's money that basically for them, what they see, it goes down the drain. Maybe the government wants to use it for, I don't know, building whatever they want. And so the trend that we're seeing is that, and Chile is going to regulate now. I don't know if there's going to be an alignment of the government with as good of user experience as possible. If that happens, great, good regulation. We have a decent example of that happening in Latin America. If not, it's very difficult. You have in Argentina, they basically regulate on a state-by-state basis, and you have like 3 operators that have basically licenses for almost all of the regions, right? Otherwise, you can only operate in a specific region. I think it's very obvious, unfortunately, that there's an incentive for like an unlicensed operator that's like, I don't need any license, and users from all over the country. I don't have to be segmenting. I don't have to be sponsoring only some specific events. If I sponsor a booth here on the street, well, does this person live here or do they live like in the next state? And I have to be concerned about that. So I think, unfortunately, the trend that we're seeing is not an improvement in terms of user experience, in terms of regulation, that at the end of the day benefits the end user. So I would say the black market as a percentage of their overall market, the tendency is to increase and keep increasing as it has happened for many years already in Europe.
That's unfortunate.
Yes.
So what is like one piece of advice you would give someone who would like to enter Latin American market next year? Like, what are the biggest mistakes to avoid?
I think unless it's something that's very performance based, where maybe a translator is enough, I would say it's very important to get feet on the ground of people that understand the culture. Because once you have someone that definitely knows like what's trendy, who are like interesting people, what are approaches, what are brands doing, all of a sudden it becomes very interesting. There was one brand, for example, in Brazil. They sponsored the football team, and I think in terms for like an activation, they offered like a beer for like the fans that would arrive X amount of time before the match, and maybe like some free bet or whatever. I don't really remember the campaign that they did, But of course, that maybe doesn't drive the most loyal players, but it drives players because, well, they get a free beer. They already go to the match. The team is sponsored by like this operator, and I think things like that they are only understood by like local people. And yes, unless it's like programmatic SEO, PPC, where maybe a translator is enough. If you want to have like a brand, there either as operator or as affiliate, you definitely need a local team.
I see. Thank you so much, Martim, for
thank you.
sharing so much. And if you're interested in learning more, follow Martim on LinkedIn, message him, and subscribe and like our podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Aneta, for the questions.
Awesome. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.